Carol Rowan, and I use the pronouns she and her. I have the privilege of being your worship associate this morning. Now, if you've not already done so, please make sure your cell phones are in worship mode. We welcome everyone here and online to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Roaoke, with a special welcome to those of you who are here the first time. For those of us here in the sanctuary, we hope you'll join us for coffee in the fellowship hall right back there after the service. Now, if you take a second to turn around and look at the camera and wave to the people at home watching on YouTube. And for those of you on YouTube, if you'd like to share your joys and concerns during the Lifelines portion of this service, please put them in the chat in the next 15 minutes. Okay? We acknowledge that our church resides on the traditional lands of the Tutelo and Monacan nations and was later farmed and developed through slave labor. We recognize and respect the ongoing connection to this land by generations of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. May our gratitude and fellowship here echo and honor that rich history. Our minister is the Reverend Walter LaFleur, who is currently on medical leave. Beginning on March 1st, our minister emeritus, the Reverend Kirk Ballin, will serve as our interim minister. Our service today will be led by Ed Sewell, whose sermon is entitled Theology and Nationality, and based on the work of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You'll hear more about Bonhoeffer from Ed. I don't want to steal your thunder. Ed is a retired faculty emeritus from the Department of Communications at Virginia Tech. He came to Blacksburg in 1972, he says, to teach a year or two. Well, he still lives in Blacksburg, and you might guess he liked it there. He's a native Texan, but a Virginian by choice. Ed has received degrees in political science, speech and theater, religion, and his master's and doctorate in communication. And related to today's sermon, he wrote his master's thesis on a rhetoric of community, the concept of community in the works of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. 2 weeks ago, he spoke at the UU Church in Blacksburg on maps and metaphors in political cartoons. Political cartoons was one of his academic areas. Now, Ed, you might want to speak to Jean Larson here. And where is Jean? I saw her coming in, over there, okay, who gave a sermon 2 weeks ago on why metaphor matters. So I'm wondering, was February 11th Metaphor Sunday or something like that? Okay. Ed also has another connection with our church. He says, in the last century, which he says sounds rather strange to say, and I hadn't thought of it that way, but he's right. He worked with Mary Banky and PFLAG to bring a series of LGBT guest speakers to Roanoke. So, now, please join me in reciting our words of welcome. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you express your identity, whatever your situation in life, whatever your experience of the holy, as you come seeking love, your presence here is a gift. Whether you're filled with sadness or overflowing with joy, needing to be alone with yourself or eager to engage with others, all who welcome all are welcome here. And our covenant? We commit to supporting each other with respect and direct communication as we work in community to explore spiritual growth and to be a force for good in the world.
Our first opening words today are from Edward Everett Hale. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. And words from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. If I see a madman driving a car into a group of innocent bystanders, then I can't simply wait for the catastrophe and then comfort the wounded and bury the dead. I must try to wrestle the steering wheel out of the hands of the driver. We are not to simply bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of injustice. We are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself.
Now light our chalice as a symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith. Hello. Okay. We now light our chalice as a symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith.
Hello, my name is Jessie. I'm the Director of Lifespan Faith Development here, and I'm going to invite up everybody who is young at heart. Oh, and I'll share my pronouns with you guys. I use they, them pronouns. First thing is not just these folks, but all of you need to wiggle a little bit, get comfortable, pull that jacket across your chest if you need to, put your gloves back on, or stick your hands in your pockets. We are going to do something that can sometimes be hard. We are going to do a little bit of meditation this morning. A few weeks ago, we signed a contract that was our 5-finger contract. And one thing that we promised was we were going to look out for the little guy. And we all decided that sometimes, even if we're not the smallest person in the room, sometimes we feel like we're the smallest person in the room. So find a focal point on the wall, or close your eyes if you choose. Make sure that you're comfortable. And the first thing that we're going to say, and you can say it out loud, you can say it in your head or in your heart, is I am little. I am little. I'm little when things are scary. I'm little when I don't know what's happening. I'm little. Now take that I am little and let's change it to I feel little. I feel little. Sometimes I just feel small. And when I feel little, I feel helpless. But we can change that to help is on the way. I feel little, but help is on the way. When I feel little and help is on the way, I still feel fear. So let's open up and say, fear is welcome. Fear is welcome. Things can be scary. Help is on the way. I feel little, but fear is welcome because fear leads to awareness. And as we become aware, we become wise. Awareness leads to wisdom. And when we're aware, And when we feel little and we know help is on the way, that wisdom leads to bravery. So let's go back to I feel little, I feel helpless, and I feel afraid. But I am aware, wise, and brave. Go ahead and come back to this space that we share together. And we are going to go upstairs and talk a little bit about some of those words that we said in our meditation. And you guys can take that home. But you can also ask these guys what we talk about upstairs. Let's do it.
Our reading today is from Letters and Papers from Prison by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. We have been silent witnesses of evil deeds. We have been drenched by many storms. We have learned the arts of equivocation and pretense. Experience has made us suspicious of others and kept us from being truthful and open. Intolerable conflicts have worn us down and even made us cynical. Are we still of any use? What we shall need is not geniuses or cynics or misanthropes or clever tacticians, but plain, honest, straightforward people. Will our inward power of resistance be strong enough and our honesty with ourselves remorseless enough for us to find our way back to simplicity and straightforwardness? Yeah.
First of all, I'm going to ask you to excuse me for wearing my hat. I don't have much hair, and it's very chilly. So anyway, I think this will not be a standard sermon, and I've tried to take what would normally be either a 6 weeks course or a 10-week semester and condense it hopefully into less than 45 minutes. Oh, that's not serious, sorry. Anyway, I want us in our minds, in our thinking, to go back in history, if we can, about 100 years to Germany, 1933. Germany was an educated nation. It was socially, economically, politically a divided nation. They had lost World War I. They were in times of great stress and depression. There was a great deal of political unrest. It was the decade when a young man named Adolf Hitler was gaining political popularity. At the same time today, I want us to think about where we are today, here in the United States, in our thinking. Because in the United States in 2024, we are an educated nation. We are socially, economically, and politically a divided nation. We have a fellow, not a young man, but a fellow named Donald Trump, who is causing great stress and distress in our nation. So in many ways, the Germany of 1933 and the United States of 2024 share a great deal in common. In German religious life, it was a time of conflict. The National Socialists, the Nazis, and Hitler had come to political power in January 1933. There was persecution, or the beginning of persecution, of Jews, of homosexuals, of Jehovah's Witnesses, of the mentally disabled, of the physically disabled. I took students a number of years ago on a study abroad trip, and we went to a little place called Birkenau-Dachau in Poland. And in one of the rooms, there were windows, like in a large department store windows. And in one window were crutches. In another window were artificial limbs. In another window were suitcases, right on down the line. When I would take students to places of interest in Eastern Europe, there would be at least some conversation, and especially on the way out. When we left Dachau, there was utter silence because of the reality that hit. I've had a prosthesis since I was 12 years old, and as I stood in front of that window full of prostheses, artificial legs and arms, I mean, it's a grappling, horrible feeling. And that was happening. That was beginning to happen in Germany in 1933. It would also included like gypsies and any minority group. Some of us would have been in there. Some of us would have been in there. And that's frightening. The United States, in its religious life, is also in conflict, but fortunately not in the same way. Today we're talking about the national Christian organizations that are right-wing, that are doing all sorts of interesting things. Not unlike what was happening in the German churches. So, while there are no official concentration camps, we know about the camps on the Mexican border. They're in Texas. While there is no official censorship going on, we know about book banning, and we could go on down the list. Well, today I want to focus on two men, one in Germany in 1933 and one in the United States was in the 20th century, and look at our experiences through their lens. So I want to focus on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was born on February the 4th, this month, in 1906. This is within some of our memories, or at least some of our parents. My grandmother was born in 1905. I also want to look at Martin Luther King Jr., born on January the 15th, 1929. My mother was born in 1925. Both were born into well-educated, affluent families who lived in good neighborhoods. Bonhoeffer was born in Berlin. His family background included doctors. His father was a psychiatrist. It included ministers, and it included lawyers. It was not a religious family. In fact, when Bonhoeffer decided to become a minister, they thought he was crazy, because they assumed that he would either be a professor or a lawyer, or maybe a doctor. King was born in Atlanta, again to a prominent family that included lots of doctors, ministers, and lawyers. And indeed, King, when he started college, did not study for the ministry, though his father was a minister. Both were highly educated and brilliant scholars. Bonhoeffer, at age 16, went to the University of Tübingen, then on to Humboldt University in Berlin, and he had his PhD by age 21. King, at age 15, went to Morehouse College. Then he went on to Crozier Seminary and to Boston University, and he had his PhD by age 26. In our age, where we are now, where many people worry about governments taking away liberties, and we certainly see that, and churches pointing and wondering how you could resist the oppression that we're beginning to see. Bonhoeffer's life and work, I think, are worth looking into, about studying. As a Lutheran clergyman, he could not actually be ordained until he was 25 years old. In 1930, after working as an assistant pastor, he was in a church in Barcelona, Spain. He finished his last year of ineligibility and went to New York City before he could be ordained to study at Union Theological Seminary. And there he studied under an unbelievably noted theologian, Reinhold Niebuhr, who was a United Church at that time. Well, it would have been not quite a United Church of Christ, which is where I come from. By the way, little humor here. Do you know what the difference is between the UU and the UCC? Well, you're Unitarian Universalists, and we're Unitarians considering Christ. We need some humor sometimes in the midst of serious topics. But he went to New York, to Union Seminary, and he was totally unimpressed with what he found in the way of religion and churches in the United States. And in fact, he was so impressed that he said, "There is no theology here." But one of his fellow students, an African-American seminary student, Frank Fisher, introduced Bonhoeffer to Harlem in New York City and to the Abyssinian Baptist Church. And Bonhoeffer fell in love with the African-American community for a number of reasons. It was there that he said he found preaching, he found worship that was reasonable. He loved the spirituals. By the way, Bonhoeffer was an extremely good pianist, and they even thought he might be a concert pianist. So listening to the music really, in his letters and papers from prison, he often actually writes and quotes music. He loved it so much. But he fell in love with the spirituals and actually took records back with him to Germany to share. So he also loved the fact that the church was doing things in Harlem. This, by the way, was the period of the Harlem Renaissance, with all of the great literary and music and all the creativity that was going on. Seeing the congregants face racism, yes, it was there. Seeing them dealing with suffering, seeing them suffering through poverty, he returned to Germany, and many people there said, he is a different man. Well, that's sensible. But then they also said, or he responded to them when they said these things, he said, "I became a Christian in America." An astounding statement. Well, Bonhoeffer returned to Germany in 1931, and he started teaching systematic theology at the University of Berlin. He was ordained in 1931, but he continued to teach seminary as well as work in the poorest neighborhood with the young people, with the youth primarily, but also with the adults there in Berlin. His career, and indeed his life, however, took an abrupt change of direction when on January the 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany. Bonhoeffer initially engaged in nonviolent acts of resistance against the Nazi regime. But in a radio address on February the 1st, 1933, that's 2 days after Hitler came to power, Bonhoeffer, in a radio address, warned of the dangers of making an idol out of the new Führer. And his speech was cut off in the middle of a sentence, and he was never allowed to do any more public broadcasting. Later, in April 1933, in a speech he gave called The Church and the Jewish Question, he was very early in this period in dealing with this issue. He identified 3 options for what he felt was true of the church. And when I say church, we're really talking about the broader religious community, but as a Lutheran theologian, that's where his focus was. He said, 1, the church can call the state to account for not fulfilling its legitimate tasks. Now think about that and think about today as well. 2, aid victims of state injustice. And 3, engage in direct, nonviolent political action if the state is out of control. Well, the following months made it clear that the Nazi regime wanted the German religious groups to become Nazified, to start thinking about their national pride and their, who they were. And churches took actions. Some of the church took action. Some of the churches put the swastika up by the altar. And some of the churches opposed that significantly. Bonhoeffer and hundreds of other pastors refused to follow the directives that came about with the Aryan clause from Nazi politicians. And they formed what became known as it was a declaration that affirmed the right of the church to stand in opposition. In 1935, Bonhoeffer went back to England briefly, and he had accepted a post to pastor 2 German-speaking churches there in England. And he used his connections with the work he had been doing in ecumenical circles around the world to keep the church informed about what was happening in Germany. And from 1935 to 1937, he actually taught at a illegal seminary at Finkenwald. It was closed, as you might guess, by the Nazis. Well, in 1936, the authorities banned Bonhoeffer from teaching, from preaching, from doing anything. The Nazis shut down the seminary. And Bonhoeffer had a twin sister, Sabine. Sabine married a Jewish husband, which meant that they were persona non grata. And indeed, she and her husband were able to escape to England for the rest of their lives. But Reinhold Niebuhr, the professor at Union, tried to get Bonhoeffer to come back to New York. And Bonhoeffer's response to Niebuhr was simply, I will have no right to participate in the reconstruction of Christian life in Germany after the war if I do not share the trials of this time with my people. So he stayed. But he did something that really surprised people. He had been so involved in the anti-Nazi movements primarily in terms of Jewish in the church, that he, in August of 1939, actually joined the German military intelligence group, the Abwehr. Officially, Bonhoeffer joined in order to avoid conscription. Plus, his overseas church connections made him a very good double agent. So he was allowed to go to Denmark and to England and to Switzerland and to share and do, double agent type work. Well, from 1939 to 43, Bonhoeffer did this kind of special missions to places quite around the world. During this time, He gave a speech at a conference in Denmark, called the Fano Conference, where he gave a speech that was called After 10 Years, an account of at the turn of the year 1942-43. And it's worth reading, but I'm not going to read you the whole speech. But I'm going to read you two sections on it. In one section, and I'm changing the word Germans and German to Americans. So when you hear the word American, Bonhoeffer was saying German. He said in the speech, "We Americans safeguarded our freedom. Where in the world was freedom spoken of more passionately than in America? However, in doing so, we misjudged the world. We did not reckon with the fact that the readiness to subordinate and commit our life to the commission could be misused in the service of evil." And then he goes on and talks about that evil. And then he ends his speech with a section called On Stupidity. And this is worth listening to. He said, "Stupidity," there's actually a German word that is kind of hard to translate, but it's usually translated as stupidity. He said, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protest nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reason falls on deaf ears. Facts are contradicted. One's prejudgment simply must not be believed. In such moments, the stupid person even becomes critical. And when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In all of this, the stupid person, in contrast to the malicious one, is utterly self-satisfied and, being easily irritated, becomes dangerous by going on the attack. For that person, greater caution is called for when dealing with a stupid person than with a malicious man. Never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reason, for it is senseless and dangerous." And then later on he says, "In conversation with stupidity, one virtually feels that one is dealing not at all with him as a person, with the person as a person, but with slogans, catchwords, and the like that have taken possession of them. They are under a spell, blinded, misused, and abused in their very being. Having thus become a mindless tool, the stupid person will also be capable of any evil, and at the same time incapable of seeing that it is evil. This is where the danger of diabolical misuse lurks, for it is this that can once and for all destroy human beings." Well, in April of 1943, Bonhoeffer was arrested for helping smuggle 14 Jews out of Germany. He spent 18 months awaiting trial in Tegel prison in Berlin. This is where he wrote letters and papers from prison, an unbelievable record. One guard tried to help Bonhoeffer escape, but he declined because the Nazis might have taken it out on his family. Bonhoeffer's imprisonment in April 1943 constricted his options significantly. I will simply go on to say that he was a part of the July 20th, 1944 assassination attempt against Hitler, along with his brother and brother-in-law, and that he was charged with knowing about the plot. He was transported through several prisons until in February 1945, he landed at Buchenwald concentration camp. He was moved from there to Flossenburg concentration camp, and a few days later, after he was convicted, on April the 8th, 1945, he was court-martialed without representation and sentenced to death. And the next day, Bonhoeffer, William Canaris, and 5 other men were ordered to strip naked and hanged. thus ends the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I'll go into less detail with Martin Luther King because I assume you all are familiar with who he is. The event that was the igniting spark for getting King's activism going was Rosa Parks. You remember Rosa Parks, who was a part of the NAACP and refused to take the seat that she was assigned on the bus. And the Montgomery boycott took place, and King was asked to be the leader of the Montgomery boycott. And from there, of course, he went on to other things. And you can recall some of those things. There was as I said, the Montgomery boycott. He, and this time, became pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. He was very much involved in Birmingham, Alabama, when we remember seeing all the gas, all the fire hoses and all that. And he, believe it or not, on April the 12th, he was put into Birmingham jail, where he wrote his unbelievable book, or short book, Letter from Birmingham Jail. Eloquent defense, I think, of disobedience in terms of the civil rights movement. And later that year, he worked with a number of civil rights people, and they formed the March on Washington with his famous I Have a Dream speech. And he also then became involved with opposition to the Vietnam War and to the Poor People's Campaign. On the evening of April the 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King went to Memphis, Tennessee. I was actually at that time teaching at a small college in Jackson, Tennessee, 55 miles east of Memphis. He went there to stand with the working sanitation workers who were on strike. And there on the balcony of the motel, he was assassinated. Well, as we conclude, I want to add a few comparisons between Bonhoeffer and King to complete the list that I started at the beginning about their education and their family background. This is a very different list. Listen to this. By the way, I'll just read them. Both were jailed for their stand for righteousness and justice. Both were jailed. Both were followers of Gandhi. Bonhoeffer had actually planned to go to India and work with and study under Gandhi before he went back to Germany. And of course, Martin Luther King and the nonviolent was very much a disciple of the Gandhi nonviolent response. Both were pastors, Bonhoeffer Lutheran, King a Baptist. Both died because of their commitment and their struggles. Bonhoeffer, as I said, was executed at the age of 39 in Flossenburg concentration camp, and King was assassinated at age 42 in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, where are we here today? Where are we now, and what can we learn from past history? What can we do? We can look at the German Christians versus the confessing church, and we can think today about Christian nationalism, which is very much equivalent if you start looking at the role of the flag in the churches and all that kind of stuff. Only last week, Nazis marched down the streets of Nashville, Tennessee, and you see the marches that took place throughout Germany. You can also think about Charlottesville near us. We know what happened there. You can listen to the rhetoric at the Trump rallies. Oh my gosh, go back and listen to the one that he just gave. You can look at the congressional and political childishness and the lying and the deception and the obstinate refusal to be just. You can look at misinformation, local, national, and global. And the list goes on. You can add to it. Should we also mention, by the way, those immigration issues along the border of Texas and throughout Europe? On the global scene, we could talk about Russia and Ukraine. We can talk about Israel and Hamas. And how do we think about such issues? And again, the list goes on. I understand that this church has taken some work in terms of the statement about Christian nationalism, as have other churches and synagogues and mosques also. And that is indeed a good response. There are other things that we can do. You all do. You do it out on the corner. In Blacksburg, it's done in front of the post office with various groups. Both Roanoke and Blacksburg do a great deal in terms of refugee settlement, resettlement. I don't know what you all do. I know our church is very involved in the Blacksburg Refugee Partnership. I close with a simple, short quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He said, "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." We are living in another historical time. What will we do?
We pass the baskets during our worship service to make a community expression of thanks for the blessings of abundance, to visibly bring in the harvest at this cherished hour of the week. Our offering says that the act of giving is as essential to our spiritual well-being as anything else we do here on Sunday mornings. The morning offering will now be given and received in the spirit of grateful fellowship. Thank you. Thank you for your contributions.
Good morning. My name is Sally Garber. It's my pleasure and honor to represent the Caring Committee this morning. As all of you know, one of the things we do is collect the joys and concerns of the congregation and announce them in the Sunday service. If you have a joy or concern, please take the time to either call the office or even call me or another member of the caring committee so that we can share that information. Another option is to put it in the caring committee book, which lives by the name tags during the week, and during Sunday service, it's here on the altar. I have no joys or concerns that are in the book this morning, but I do want to report that Tim Andriano is now at Brandon Oaks, and he does welcome visitors. So if you have a chance, please give him a call or drop him a note. One of the ways to do that is either to send it to Brandon Oaks or send it to his home. His housekeeper has been wonderful about collecting things and taking it to him. I also will give you the opportunity this morning to light a candle if you have a joy or concern that you're holding on your heart. So please, as you come forward, use both sides of the altar. Thank you. Can you help me out? Thanks, Carol. Excuse me, my apologies to Bob Hood. I missed this information, so let me share what he has written. Joy and pain are woven fine. The ranks of the angels in UU heaven grew by one this week when they welcomed home the Reverend James Eller Isaacs. After battling a long-term illness, Jane took her last breath in Portland, Oregon on Valentine's Day, February 14th. She was under the care of a hospice nurse and surrounded by friends and family. Her 3 children, Jesse, Jonah, and Hannah, along with their spouses, were nearby. Her 5 grandchildren were all near at hand as well. There's a sizable community of Unitarian Universalists in the Portland area who will surely gather in celebration of her life. Jane was not only a cradle UU, but she also, with her very lovely husband, the late Reverend Bob Eller Isaacs, served 2 different flagship UU congregations. Their co-ministry began in Oakland, California, at the First Unitarian Church of Oakland, and concluded decades later with Unity UU Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. To see my dear friend mount the pulpit on a Sunday morning, engaging the whole gathering with a long and loving look, and then solemnly intone the congregation with the words, "You are enough." This, for me, was always stirring and heartwarming. I loved getting down on the floor after the conclusion all of the Saturday night activities at Oakland's First Unitarian All-Church Retreat. So gathered, Reverend Jane and I engaged some of the young adults, many teens and older kids, in a closing round of spoons. I called this Friendship First Cutthroat Spoons. You see at the conclusion of each round, the person who fails to grab a spoon off the floor is out. A spoon is withdrawn and the play resumes. In the first round of 2 people, the spoonless player is the loser. The loser has won the right to sing Feelings or another fun selection at the end of the Sunday morning breakfast meal. My dear friend Jane Eller Isaacs taught me that at UU we say, all are worthy, all are welcome, and I add, amen. Thank you.
We join in a prayer. It's by, and I'll mispronounce his name, Rabindranath Tagore. Join me. Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Let me not look for allies in life's battlefield, but to my own strength. Let me not crave in anxious fear to be saved, but hope for the patience to win my freedom. Grant me that I may not be coward, feeling your mercy in my success alone, but let me find the grasp of your hand in my failures.
We have a couple of announcements. The events of this week, as well as a couple of new announcements, are listed in today's church bulletin. And some are also listed in last Thursday's email newsletter. If you're not receiving the newsletter and would like to, please contact our church administrator, Susan Cousins, at admin, the at sign comes now, not before at, admin@uuroanoke.org. I do have another announcement. Heidi Thompson and Francis Livingston will be selling Girl Scout cookies at coffee hour today. Please support our UUCR Girl Scouts. They accept cash or card. Okay, they're making it easy for all of us. Now, on a personal note, I'd like to remind you that the Green Team's climate rally will be held outside at 12:15 on the corner. You see the sun is shining out there? You might want to go out there and warm up, okay? Everybody's welcome. I'd like to thank all of those who helped with today's service, with a special thank you to Ed for his thought-provoking and inspiring sermon. Thank you, Ed. And now, as you're willing and able, please stand and join in the singing of hymn number 170 in our hymnal, but don't look in the hymnal because the words are different. We are a gentle, angry people. The words will be up there. And extinguishing of the chalice. Our benediction today is from the letter from Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King Jr. Though I was initially disappointed at being categorized as an extremist, as I continued to think about the matter, I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction from the label. King went on to quote John Bunyan, "I will stay in jail to the end of my days before I make a butchery of my conscience." I think I'll repeat that again. I will stay in jail to the end of my days before I make a butchery of my conscience. King continued, so the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be? Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? Hello. Together, we have enjoyed the warmth and beauty of stories of this flame and of this special community. As our chalice flame is extinguished this morning, we could still remember that its glow is carried within us. We can use our inner lights and this flame to kindle new sparks throughout our lives and in the world. May the spirit of peace and togetherness bless your lives. Go into your week with peace, and may the light of the chalice go with you.